Los Angeles, Neil enters the hospital and crosses several corridors until he finds the back door. Because he's wearing a uniform, nobody suspects anything. Once outside, he steals one of the ambulances. At a construction supplier, Chris buys a bunch of explosive charges. Downtown, Michael picks up Waingro in a stolen tow truck. Trejo is following an armored car and contacts the others to confirm the location. Chris joins Neil in the ambulance, and all 5 thieves put on masks to hide their faces. Neil stops the ambulance in the middle of the road to make the armored car stop too. Then the tow truck crashes against it and sends it rolling. The armored car ends up crashing against a bunch of vehicles in a dealership parking lot. While a guard makes a call on the radio for help, the team uses the explosives to blow up the armored back door, which causes the windows in all the surrounding cars to explode too. Then they make the 3 guards come out, and Chris proceeds to search the envelopes from the safe until he finds the one he wants. Knowing the police are coming, Trejo puts a spike strip across the street. Waingro gets angry at the guards because they keep moving, and he doesn't realize they're deaf and dizzy because of the explosion. Eventually, he snaps and shoots a guard in the head. Another guard reaches for his gun, but Waingro shoots him down. Then he points his gun at the 3rd guy, and after getting his teammates' approval, he kills him too. Once Chris has the right envelope, the team rushes to get in the ambulance. While Trejo drives, everyone changes clothes in the back. Soon the police show up and try to chase them, but the first few cars blow out their tires on the spike strip and crash, leaving the other cars stuck behind them. While the cops search the area on foot, the team abandons the ambulance a few blocks away with a bomb in the back. They drive away in another car while the bomb explodes, destroying their weapons and gear. In the evening, Neil meets with Nate, his money laundering expert. In the stolen envelope, they find hundreds of millions in bearer bonds from a company called Malibu Equity and Investments, owned by corrupt businessman Roger Van Zant. They'll make Roger pay them lots of money in exchange for getting his bonds back. Nate also tells Neil of a $10 million job offered by a man named Kelso, and Neil agrees to arrange a meeting with him. Meanwhile, Detective Vincent arrives at the scene of the heist and joins his team to search for clues. They've already found all the vehicles on their system and know the places they were stolen from, but there are no other leads. A homeless man heard the thieves shouting and could identify the nickname Slick being used, but he didn't see any faces. Following all the debris on the scene, Vincent quickly puts together what happened and concludes they're dealing with professionals. At a truck stop diner, Neil joins his team for a meal. Waingro tries to justify his killing the guards, but Neil smashes his head on the table because killing officers causes more in-depth investigations. Then they go outside, and Neil continues to beat Waingro up, even getting his gun ready to kill him. However, he has to stop when he sees a police car drive by. The team waits until the vehicle is gone, and when they turn around, they discover Waingro has disappeared. They search the whole area to no avail. When Chris arrives home, his wife Charlene notices that the money he brought from the heist isn't as much as he promised. An argument ensues until Chris breaks some things and reveals he used part of the money to pay his bookies. Charlene tries to make him see that he has a gambling problem, but Chris tells her that she can leave if she doesn't like it. When their child starts crying, Chris storms out of the house. The next day, Vincent and his partner burst into a chop shop to interrogate the owner, who regularly works as their informant. They argue for a while until the detectives threaten him with jail time, causing the guy to tell them that his brother will meet with Neil at a club in Koreatown tonight with a possible lead in the case. Meanwhile, Neil meets Kelso, who tells him about a new potential heist. The main downtown branch of the Far East National Bank collects hard currency for distribution to its other branches. On certain days of the week, the bank holds at least 10 million. At first, Neil thinks it's a bad idea because the bank employees would quickly set off an alarm. However, Kelso explains he's a hacker, and he can shut the alarm down 15 minutes before they strike. While Neil agrees to take the job, Nate talks to Roger to arrange the bond exchange. When Neil gets home, he finds Chris sleeping on his floor. He calls Charlene to let her know where her husband is. Then he makes coffee. Chris shares what's happening in his home life, and Neil wonders if Charlene may be cheating on him, but Chris denies it. Then Neil tells him about the incoming jobs. Later, Neil calls Roger from a payphone to confirm a meeting at a drive-in movie theater. While looking around, he notices Charlene leaving a motel room with another man. Furious, he bursts into the room and confronts Charlene, violently cornering her against the wall. Charlene swears she was just making business, but Neil doesn't believe her and tells her to give Chris one last chance because their next job will fix things. If Chris fails her again after that, then Neil will punish him himself. In Koreatown, Vincent visits the club his informant told him about and meets the brother, who tells him that he was incarcerated with a man who pulls off large heists and was seen on the street recently. Vincent is about to leave because he isn't getting useful information, but the informant reveals that the guy's nickname was Slick. Vincent keeps pressing him until he learns the name Michael and immediately calls his squad, who find Michael's file in the system. They all agree to set up extensive surveillance. At the empty drive-in theater, Neil meets with Roger's drop man, and they begin the exchange while they stay in their cars. However, there's a second guy slowly sneaking around that gets close enough to the window to try to shoot Neil. Thankfully, Chris has been hiding nearby all along for situations like this and warns Neil through his headset. Neil sees the assassin in the mirror and drives the car in reverse, which crushes the man's leg. As Neil drives away, Chris opens fire, so the drop man also speeds up and leaves his partner behind. The assassin tries opening fire at Neil's vehicle, but both Neil and Chris start shooting at him at the same time, and Neil ends up running over him with the car. The driver almost escapes the theater, but he's shot down by Michael. Afterward, Neil checks the payment envelope and finds scrap paper instead of money. He calls Roger to cancel the deal and swears to kill him. That night, Neil and his friends have dinner together with their wives and kids, unaware that the police are watching them. They recognize Chris and Michael from other cases, but not Neil. Meanwhile, Waingro is at a motel with a working lady. After she finishes her services, he reveals he's the infamous serial killer who goes after night workers and quickly kills her. Moments later, the police are investigating the crime scene, and Vincent has to stop the victim's mother from coming too close to the body. The lady has a breakdown, and Vincent comforts her the best he can. A few nights later, Vincent and his men hide in a van near a precious metals repository, where Michael deactivates the alarm system by climbing the utility pole. While Neil stands guard, Chris breaks the lock and goes inside to find the safe. He then uses special tools to try to break it open. When one of the cops puts down his rifle against the van wall, Neil hears the noise and immediately rushes into the building to announce they're leaving. The trio goes away without stealing anything, and Vincent tells his men not to arrest them. A simple breaking and entering would give them just a few months of jail, and Vincent would rather catch them on something bigger. The next day, Vincent and his men find Charlene's lover and interrogate him for information. Meanwhile, Neil tells the team that the police must have bugged their phones and thinks they should lie low for a while. However, Chris is in desperate need of money and convinces him to do Kelso's job. The team goes to a shipyard to make some plans, and the cops watch them from afar. After the criminals leave, the police try to figure out what the team is planning to do in that area. There's nothing of value to steal there, which makes Vincent realize this is a trap to make the officers reveal themselves. On top of a crane, Neil takes pictures of the entire group. That night, Neil meets with Nate, who gives him intel on all the detectives and how they work. He also shares the schematics for Kelso's bank heist, and Neil thinks it's worth the risk. Meanwhile, Vincent gets on the surveillance helicopter that is trailing Neil. After flying for a while, he finally finds him and leaves the chopper to get in a car instead. Vincent chases after Neil, who pulls over to look less suspicious. To Neil's shock, Vincent tells him they should have coffee and asks him to follow him. Minutes later, both men are at a diner discussing how their private lives suffer because of their jobs. Suddenly, Vincent says he doesn't like killing, but he will kill Neil to stop him from killing an innocent. In return, Neil says he won't hesitate to shoot him either. The next day, Vincent arrives at the station and is furious to learn that Neil and his team have managed to disappear without the surveillance team noticing. It turns out the thieves are working at the bank's parking lot, where they're getting things ready for the heist. At the same time, Waingro shows up at Roger's office to offer a deal. Later, Neil takes Chris and Michael to a diner where he recognizes Donald, an old prison friend of his who is working in the kitchen while on parole. At that moment, they get a call from Trejo, who informs them that the police are following him, so he won't be able to join them for the heist. Neil decides to approach Donald and offer him Trejo's job, which Donald immediately takes. On his way out, Donald pushes his boss to the ground for treating him like trash. Afterward, Neil, Michael, and Chris enter the bank through different doors. Once they're in the correct positions, Chris begins beating up a guard and ties him up while his friends threaten everyone with weapons to keep them down, disarming the rest of the guards in the process. Neil assures all the hostages that they won't lose a dime because it's insured by the government, so as long as they don't move, nobody gets hurt. Then Neil punches a manager and gets his key, which they use to access the safe and fill their bags with cash. At the police station, the detectives receive information from one of their criminal informants and learn about the bank heist. Vincent and his men immediately take off. At the bank, Michael comes out first and gets in the car with Donald. Next, Chris and Neil come out, and they're seen by the police as they arrive. Neil gets in the car first, but Chris stops at the door because he sees the detectives across the street and opens fire. Civilians panic and begin running away while the cops open fire. Michael also starts shooting through the window, and stray bullets begin causing damage all over the place. Soon, a bullet hits a cop in the neck, instantly killing him despite his bulletproof vest. Vincent rushes to check on his friend, and Chris uses the moment to jump into the car, allowing Donald to finally take off. All the windows in the vehicle explode as the shootout continues and officers chase the criminals on foot. The team doesn't hesitate to shoot back, but Donald has trouble driving after a bullet destroys two of the tires. In the chaos, Donald is shot in the head, and the car crashes into a parked vehicle. Neil, Michael, and Chris are forced to get out and find the police blocking the road. The shootout escalates with several more cops killed and numerous cars destroyed in the process. The criminals continue advancing while firing their weapons, always trying to find cover and a way out. Michael manages to take down another detective, but ends up separated from his friends. Chris reaches the roadblock first, but while focused on it, he doesn't see the cops sneaking up on his left and gets shot in the shoulder. After Neil kills a few more officers, the firefight finally ends. Neil rushes to Chris' side and helps him stand so they can run together to a grocery store's parking lot. A few surviving officers pursue them, so Neil keeps shooting, killing more cops while civilians scream in horror. Vincent does his best to guide the panicking people to safety. Since the police are occupied with civilians, Neil manages to get Chris into a car, and they drive away. Meanwhile, two detectives chase after Michael, who scares patrons in a restaurant before crossing a fountain. The chaos causes a kid to be left behind, and Michael grabs him for protection. However, Vincent appears behind him and waits for the right moment to open fire, killing Michael with a single bullet to the head. Vincent then returns the child to his mother. When the heist is reported on the news, Donald's girlfriend learns of his death, and Charlene realizes her husband is in serious trouble. Neil takes Chris to a doctor friend, who removes the bullet and administers medication. Chris has a fractured clavicle, but Neil refuses to let him rest for long. After changing into clean clothes from the doctor, Neil tells Chris that Nate will pick him up and keep him hidden until it's time to leave town. Neil suspects Trejo has been leaking information to the police and needs to find an alternate escape plan. Chris announces he's not leaving without Charlene, but Neil insists he must, as she's a liability. Meanwhile, Charlene calls her lover and asks him to take her and her baby away. Shortly after, Neil sneaks into Trejo's house with his gun drawn, only to find Trejo's wife dead on the bed. He searches further and finds Trejo bleeding on the floor. Trejo reveals that Waingro and Roger threatened him into cooperating with the police by endangering his wife. When Neil tells him she's already dead, Trejo begs for mercy, and Neil shoots him before leaving. Neil calls Nate on his way out to check on Chris and get Roger's address. At the same time, Vincent and his team raid an apartment and drag a man out onto the balcony. Vincent throws him through the balcony door and grabs him by the hair, demanding to know who tipped off the police. The man confesses it was Waingro. Meanwhile, Neil sneaks into Roger's backyard, sees him watching TV, and throws a chair through the window to break in. Pointing a gun at Roger, Neil demands Waingro's location. When Roger claims ignorance, Neil shoots him multiple times. Since Charlene's lover traded information for protection, she and her baby are taken to a safe house under heavy police guard. The detective pressures her to cooperate by warning that her silence makes her an accomplice and she could go to jail, leaving her child parentless. Charlene finally agrees to call Chris to set up a trap. Neil stops by his girlfriend's house and asks her to run away with him. She recognizes him from the news and runs off, but Neil catches up and hugs her, promising everything will be okay. In the morning, he gives her money and sends her to a safe house. She refuses to kiss him goodbye. Later, Neil visits Nate to collect fake passports, credit cards, and plane tickets. When Neil asks about Chris, Nate reveals he wants to find his wife. Inspired, Neil returns to check on his girlfriend again and gives a heartfelt speech about loneliness, letting her decide whether to leave alone or go with him. His words convince her to run away with him. That evening, Chris arrives at the address Charlene gave him. The police make her meet him on the balcony. With a subtle hand gesture and look, she warns him it's a trap. Chris quickly turns around and pretends to ask neighbors for directions before leaving. Charlene tells the police the man wasn't Chris, but they don't believe her. A police car blocks the street and demands ID from Chris. He hands over a fake one, which they accept, letting him go. Meanwhile, Vincent returns home to find his stepdaughter unconscious in the bathtub. He pulls her out and bandages her injuries, realizing she attempted suicide. Vincent takes her to the hospital, where he and his wife wait as doctors work to save her. On the road, Neil is driving away with his girlfriend when Nate calls with Waingro's location. After hesitating, Neil turns the car around and heads to a hotel. He tells his girlfriend to wait in the car while he finishes one last job. Entering through the back door, Neil uses the employee phone to get Waingro's room number by pretending to be room service. He steals a uniform, crosses the lobby, and takes the elevator. At his floor, he props the elevator door open with a trash can and triggers the fire alarm. Unbeknownst to Neil, police are in the building and watching security cameras. They notify Vincent, who leaves the hospital to join the operation. As hotel guests panic over the alarm, Neil knocks on Waingro's door while hiding his face from the peephole. Waingro opens the door just slightly, and Neil kicks it in, hitting him. After beating Waingro, Neil shoots him to death. As he exits, a cop tries to stop him, but Neil takes him down. With cops surrounding the hotel, Vincent arrives by helicopter. Spotting Neil's girlfriend waiting in the car, he grows suspicious and approaches. At the same time, Neil exits and sees Vincent, prompting him to flee in the opposite direction, abandoning his girlfriend. Vincent gives chase, and they end up at the airport, where a shootout ensues. Neil takes cover and waits for a plane to pass, hoping its lights will expose Vincent. However, Vincent spots Neil's shadow and shoots him first. As Neil dies, Vincent agrees to shake his hand.